That voice is always so weird. Recording in progress. I would think it would be more like the Alexa voice, which seems more human. But I'm grateful. So I'm with Laurie Holland, an LPC out of Denver, Colorado. And Laurie, I'm going to let our listeners know that we do not go way back. A lot of times I'll have people on the show that like I usually start the intro and I'll be like, I've known so and so for 20 years. And this is actually our first time meeting. And so
Yes.
I'm grateful to have you on. We keep it very organic. I don't necessarily know where we're going to go in our exploration, but I would love if you can give some of our listeners just a little bit of an intro on who you are, how we connected, and the work that you did some in the past and then are currently doing.
Okay, you might have to remind me of all those different things, but
Yeah, if
so
you want me to just
basically,
ask you a million questions, I'll be like, so
so so you and I connected on Instagram, I think just a week or two.
yeah, yep,
Yeah. So I think the heart that we share is for kids, and a lot of my experience, my most of my clinical experience as well as just experience in general in working with people has been with children. Children and adolescents. I in the school systems for almost 20 years. And I'm now working primarily with adults, but I'm also now beginning to help people who are working with children and adults just to help them, give them some tools to help their kids, especially manage stress and reduce stress. I'm very big on just noticing the tie of our unresolved emotions and how that can show up later as unwanted behaviors, as well as even unwanted physical symptoms, including chronic physical illness. So I have a big heart for kids. I have worked a lot extensively with children who've had pretty severe trauma and anxiety and grief. And I think in the work that I've done with my adult clients, I recognize that the vast majority of the heavy backpack that they're carrying around, which is just an illustration that I use for a lot of the emotional weight that we all carry around as humans, is a lot of it does stem from their earlier years. So if there are, tools that I can use to help equip children and adults to help lessen that load, the better.
absolutely. And Lori, I think it's beautiful. I know I'll try to always kind of look at things in a holistic light, whether it be kind of a combination between the biochemical, neurological, psychological, emotional, socio-cultural, spiritual, just trying to like cover every lens. But the thing that's so apparent and predominant is early childhood and these formative years and what happens in early childhood we hold with us forever, whether it's through explicit or implicit memories. And like you mentioned, psychosomatically, and it's like these formative years, so much growth is happening. And you can see it. You can see it in older adults that are the walking wounded that carry the baggage from very difficult childhood traumas and what they've endured.
Yeah.
Um, and I always like one of the quotes that says, your trauma is not your fault, but healing it is your responsibility.
Yes.
And the only time I don't necessarily agree with that is if you're fucking 11 years old.
Right.
And what I mean by that is like, yes, if you're an adult and you've gone through emerging young adulthood and you're at this place, it's like, okay, how can you work on your inner child? How can you take whatever experiences you've endured and begin to really dive in and do your own holistic growth work? The interesting
Yes.
part for me about kids is you're with them at such a vulnerable time where they're going to have to do that work later on. And you're with them while they're enduring so much other growth, identity development, ego formation, peer relationships, worldview, sexuality, growth, their understanding of the world, anxiety, and then you throw in our society and culture and screen time and Instagram and TikTok, and it's like, I'm with you, man. I want to, my life's work is devoted to youth work, giving them a voice. I think they're so beautiful and they teach us in so many ways how to come
Yes.
out of our neurotic adult, crystallized kind of thought process, and they bring this beauty of the present moment, but being able to just carve sacred space for them. So I think that's awesome. And you mentioned um, working internationally too. You said going to Africa and doing work.
Yeah. Yeah, I've gone to Africa 4 times, Kenya once, and Zambia 3 times. And, it's interesting actually, the way that my journey started was after my very first volunteer trip to Kenya, Africa. I was in my last year of college. I was going to a college in Minnesota, where I'm originally from. And I had just returned from that 1 month service learning volunteer trip and working with the children there. And got back and feeling like, oh my Lord, I have clarity in my heart of my purpose and my direction. Because, a lot of us, when we're in college, we're like, I don't know what we're doing. We're getting a degree, but I don't really know what direction we're heading.
Right,
At least
right.
that's what it was for me. So I'm getting this degree, but what do I actually really want to do with my life? And working with vulnerable children and just, really seeing up close and personal the major necessities of actually even just holding a child, for example, going into orphanages and walking into this orphanage nursery and seeing crib after crib after crib after crib of young babies just lying there, just waiting for someone to pick them up. It really broke my heart. So anyway, I got back from that trip, and in my heart, I really felt like I wanted to be an advocate. I wanted to be a voice for the voiceless. I wanted to be able to, advocate for them. Children, not just in Africa, but children around the globe.
Yeah,
Anyone,
yeah.
any child that, and all of our children are vulnerable to a certain degree. That
I
could be a whole podcast.
I just got a visual of you being like arms out and being like, "Bring your children. I will give them voice." But like I mean, I'm sure it rocked you to your core where you were
It
like,
really did.
"This is a
It
call.
really did.
I have to do
It
something."
was, yes. And it really felt, it was almost like a spiritual experience in a way, because I felt a connection to my deeper purpose and what I'm on the planet to do. So when I got back from that trip, I was in my early 20s. 2 weeks later, I was diagnosed with cancer. And when I was diagnosed with cancer, and it was a really random story. And I mean, it's really random how I found out I had cancer. I had a crack in my toenail, no pain, nothing. I went to the dermatologist for the very first time. They looked over my skin while I was there, like, well, you do have very fair skin, you're a redhead. Let's just take a look over your skin while you're here.
Right.
They found a mole on the middle of my chest here, right over my heart center. And they had asked me if I noticed any change. And I'm like, yeah, I actually remember it being a little lighter. They did a biopsy, got the phone call from the doctor saying, we don't know what's wrong with your toenail, but unfortunately, your biopsy was positive. We found melanoma. And in my mind, early 20s, I didn't know what melanoma was. I knew what skin cancer was because my
Right.
grandmother, she had a number of different, skin cancer, scraping skin off her, she had a lot of different situations of skin cancer, and not melanoma though. So when the doctor described to me what melanoma is and the severity of it, they didn't know what stage it was in. I initially was in shock. And then I had a flood of fear, because I thought, my God, what if, worst case scenario, what if I die?
Right.
What if I have to go through chemotherapy? I lose all my hair, all of that. So I lived near a lake at the time. I would walk to this lake every single day. Nature is my therapy. I get so much nourishment from nature. I would walk to the lake. I would journal. I would cry. I would pray. I would journal. I would cry. I would pray. And So here's one of the things that I'm a firm believer in is the phrase of when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah.
There was a book that crossed my path, and it was basically talking about the power of gratitude and not just being grateful for the good things, but having this deeper sense of almost like surrender and gratitude for the bigger picture, even
Yeah.
the bad things that are happening. And when I first read this book, there was something in me that was drawn to that viewpoint. And I was also angry at the time. So I was like, I cannot even imagine myself being grateful for having cancer.
Right.
It's like, what do I have to lose?
Cool.
So I started practicing that. I started practicing that principle of looking for everything to be grateful for and trusting the process. And it got to the point where I had the most peace I have ever experienced, even to this day, 20 some years later.
Yeah.
I have never experienced the radical peace that I did during that time. So here was the most extreme fear with the opportunity and potential to experience the most radical peace. So I was experiencing through those practices, I was experiencing the mind-body connection. I had never heard of mind-body medicine.
Right.
I
Right.
never heard about psychoneuroimmunology. I never heard about any of that. It was not even on my radar.
It was a true phenomenological felt sense, like you were in
Yes,
it, not
I was,
studying it, not reading it.
yes,
You embodied it and felt it.
I was experiencing it, and my brain was like, what the hell is this? Like, how is this happening? So I did that for about 2 weeks. So during that 2 weeks, I still didn't know what stage the cancer was in. All of a sudden, this large lump appears on my head, on my left temple, just this large protruding lump. Overnight, woke up, boom, there's a big lump. I remember I didn't notice it. My aunt noticed it. She was sitting across the table from me, and she's like, what bit you? Did you get something? Did something bite you? And I looked over at my dad. My dad saw it. I could see the look on his face. And I was like, oh shit, something is seriously wrong. Because
Yeah.
I could just see the fear in his eyes. I went and looked in the mirror, and the flood of fear came back again. I went to the doctor a few days later. They're looking over my medical record, and they're noticing, we see, you were just diagnosed with melanoma. We don't know what stage it's in. We're going to have to do a surgery. We don't know if it's a tumor. We don't know if it's this, that, this, that. They kept going over all of the, you know, all the bad things that are going to happen as a result of the surgery that they're going to perform. And so I was in this office with the doctor and the nurse, and everything just started to blacken. I
Yeah.
started blacking out. And it was just so much for me to take in. And I remember walking out of that office thinking, okay, the doctor is scared for me. The doctor, the professional, is fearful.
Right.
What does that mean for me? So I remember calling my mom and just crying my eyes out, just feeling so scared for my life, even though I had experienced that peace, right?
Yeah. And at this
It
point,
is a
did you
practice.
know where the melanoma, what had they given you any information on that?
No. So this was all during a stage of uncertainty, still before the second procedure with the melanoma, where they were going to take a larger biopsy.
Right. Okay.
So during this time, it was all uncertain. So I was like, okay, I'm feeling really, really scared now. What can I do? I went back to the lake. I journaled. I cried. I prayed. I practiced the gratitude. I was like looking for everything. And then the peace came back even stronger. And I was like, I mean, here we are 20 years, and I get emotional sometimes because I'm like,
No, you're gonna make me cry. I'm
how is
in.
that possible?
Yeah.
And so my mind was just so perplexed by this radical peace that can actually happen,
Yeah.
despite all the fears, despite even the medical experts saying, this is really scary. We're scared for you. And so to make a long story short, I went in to get the skin cancer assessed. They took a large chunk right over my heart center. Got great news from that. They caught it at stage 1. They were able to remove it all.
Awesome.
Went in for the surgery here. It ended up being a random cyst. Every side effect that the doctor said was going to happen did not happen. They said I was going to lose all the muscles in my forehead and lose a lot of my facial expression. So many things that they said were going to happen didn't happen. In fact, before my surgery, I went in for my pre-op appointment to the same doctor that saw me pass out in his office. Prior, he was going over all of the details of the surgery, and he looked at me and he said, I think he was kind of caught a little bit off guard because I was so grounded.
Right.
And he looked at me, he's like, are you okay? I looked at him and I said, yes, I'm okay. And then he's like, are you sure you're okay? I'm like, yes, I'm actually okay. And so that was the start in my early 20s. That was the start of this deep hunger and thirst. I wanted to learn as much as I could about the mind, about the body, about the spirit, and how they are connected, not separate.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like they are not separate.
Yeah.
They are connected. And I want to understand and learn about this and be able to help other people experience the same kind of freedom.
Man, Laurie, how
So,
wild. You had me as I was listening, and I'm really grateful for you sharing that and your journey. But it's so true. It's something that when you say it's a practice, it's like it's there with us right now. And it's almost like a forgetting. Daily we forget and we get consumed by task-based existence and everything that needs to happen, and you start to place this weight, and it's a tremendous amount of fear and anxiety. And you feel like, I was working with a young client one time, and he said it's like, he was very profound, and he would make certain statements. And I remember we were driving in Alabama, and he said, yeah, man, it's like you're spinning all these plates, like the performers that will take the plates and spin them on
yeah,
plates and hold them and juggle them. And so many times we're doing that with so much of our lives, afraid that if we stop spinning that plate, something horrific is going to happen. And like when you describe going to this water and being in nature and having a radical acceptance of anything and everything that could occur in your existence, and finding peace in your heart and soul, and tuning into gratitude of just the rushing water of your body as it is right now. It is such a metaphysical, unitive consciousness, out of body, transcendent experience. And it's like, aren't we all living that? Aren't we all spirits with these? I like this one guy, Duncan Trussell, who's an awesome philosopher. He says, like, we got these meat sacks, these meat vessels that we're in and housed in. But when you can get to that place that you obviously got when you were younger, and I'm sure you have waves of it now, I think about what Alan Watts says, where it's like it's there all the time. It's like a radio frequency, and we just have to tune
yeah,
into it. And then that peace and that eternal resonance, it's not something that isn't happening right now. It is. How do we clear our minds enough to enter into that state?
yeah,
And man, I'm so grateful for you
yeah.
sharing, because I was just sitting here bitching to you about it's Friday. I'm exhausted. I don't know how I'm gonna recharge. And but that's my recharge, is having you share that beautiful, awesome journey. And I mean, the bravery as a 22-year-old young female to find out that you might have cancer and you might gonna lose your life, and to just lean in and follow your heart kind of alignment, which was pulling you towards this. Let me have gratitude for the abundance of life that is all around me all the time, and tune into that, regardless of whatever is happening in my present moment. That's like, I mean, that's nirvana. That's enlightenment.
Well,
When
I
you,
think that's what, yeah, I think that's exactly where the piece came in, because there's something about, when I was practicing that, in noticing, I think the first part of what helped me get to that place was, number one, identifying how I felt and acknowledging it, acknowledging that I did feel fearful. I felt the fear. And I just giving that voice and saying, this is how I feel, without identifying with that feeling as me being a fearful person, but this is what I'm feeling.
Right. The
I think
observer.
yeah, that was the first step, is acknowledging that. And then also, recognizing that there's way more to not just my life, but the lives of others, and the whole, when you just kind of keep zooming out, zooming out, zooming out, and observing globally, there's way more to this picture. So that part of the trust and the surrender was, there's something more that meets the eye. There's something happening behind the scenes that I don't see, that's for the best of everyone involved. And even if that means it is time for my life to end here, then I trust that it is for the best of everyone involved. And that that is a place that, when you say it's a daily practice, that is not something that I've been practicing daily. Let me tell you, full honesty and disclosure, there are so many random things that trip me up on a day-to-day.
Yeah.
So many random things that I get stressed about. And again, that's just part of being human.
Yeah.
So all that to say, that was the beginning, really, of recognizing that, a deeper part of the purpose that I already felt in terms of advocating for the children and really empowering the children. Additionally, understanding, how do these components of the mind and the body and spirit, that connection, how does that function and operate? And now, 20 some years later, I can reflect back at all these different things that I've done since that time period, and seeing it all kind of come together now, where I'm now mentoring other healers and other clinicians and other doctors to get these same kind of results with their clients that I have in the last 20 years of putting all these pieces together. It's really, honestly, it's an honor.
That's beautiful. You make me think about um, the importance of like that daily practice. And like you said, because I feel like even in moments like this, when I talk to you and I listen to you and you share your story, you brought my physiology to a certain place. I was able to join you in that healing and that experience and what that felt like. And we can do that as vibrational beings and exchange energy with one another. And what I think, in so many ways, I'll describe sometimes, and you can call it what you will. You could call it depth psychotherapy, counseling, humanistic counseling, relational counseling, energy work, spirit. You could look at it through several lenses.
Yeah.
We're widening perspective and expanding consciousness. And so to be able to do that for another through your own lived experiences is beautiful. And we're instruments to kind of help and guide one another. And as we do it collectively, it can be beautiful. But you're right, it's that daily practice. And so I know for me, um, I started a morning routine where I'll wake up and I'm studying that book, The Course in Miracles.
Oh, yes.
And
Marianne Williamson.
yes, no, I can't remember. I can't remember her name, but I love Marianne Williamson, and she's
Okay.
phenomenal too. And maybe she's done work with that as well. But it's still, it could be whatever, whomever. Like you
Yeah.
spoke about that text that brought you into that state. It's like these are invitations, and they're just out there, and they're from different teachers and guides and healers. And so, if you can quiet yourself enough and let your internal sense kind of guide you to, like you said, when the student is ready, if you can get to that place of humility and give voice in a really raw fucking real way about, like, yo,
Yeah.
I'm scared, I am terrified, my whole
Yeah.
world is getting shocked. But that's where I think, you look at times where the most transmutative and transformative experiences happen for human beings, and they're always wrought with pain and some type of dark night of the soul that makes you question your entire existence. But when you look back and reflect on it, you're like, well, damn, that's when I had the moment. the moment of clarity, and and that shifted,
Yes.
and that was a seed for so much of my growth. I just think it's beautiful, and I thank you for sharing it. And earlier you mentioned, I'm curious to know, I'm going to jump to, you were talking about anxiety
Yeah.
and a method and a technique that you've developed, that you kind of train clinicians to use, that you work with adults and with children around anxiety. I'm
Yes.
curious if you want to talk some about that.
Yeah. So I actually, so I was studying a technique called neuro emotional technique, NET. I'm not sure if you've heard of that one.
Mm.
It's a mind body stress reduction technique. I was studying, I studied that with the doctors who developed it and got certified in it and then got advanced certification in it. Um, One of the most powerful tools that I've used in working with anxiety and trauma and any kind of emotional pain, even physical pain that has an emotional component. But what I found as I was using this technique, the way that it was designed and developed, involved touching the client, just a little touch on the top of the wrist. But I couldn't do that when I was working in schools. I could use that in my clinical practice so long as, we went over all the ethics around that and the comfort of my client or whatever. But when I was
Love to
working in the
touch you.
schools,
Do I have consent to touch you? Please sign this
right,
informed consent.
right.
All that stuff that they say, and then you really start practicing with clients, and they're like, "I don't give a shit, man. Will it help?" You know, what I mean? They're like,
Right.
"Can you help me feel better?" Cool,
Yes, exactly. Can you help me feel better? So the title of my technique is called the Feel Better Fast Technique.
awesome,
So because that's what it does. It helps people feel better. So what happened as a result of learning this really, really powerful tool, having this amazing, powerful tool in my toolbox, but feeling handcuffed in terms of I couldn't use that tool in that setting. And that was primarily, the vast majority of my work was in the schools. So for the first couple of years, my question was, how do I get this in the schools? How do I get this in the schools with all the red tape? What my question changed to when I realized, Laurie, that's just not going to happen. Like, let's just be honest. It's just not going to happen. The question changed in my mind. How can I get the same results with that technique, but do it in a different way? So I
awesome.
started asking myself that question. I didn't have the answer. I asked myself that question. Didn't have the answer. Asked myself, put it to the side. One day back in 2017, it all came together. I had a kid in crisis in my office. I just intuitively was like, try this, put it all together. And his affect of just being severely distraught and just really highly emotionally charged, to noticing him coming down to the place of, I mean, it looked almost as if he had just finished a yoga class or something. Like, he was
Yeah,
so
yeah,
calm, his breathing was back to normal. I witnessed his physiology change. And in my mind, I was like, oh, that's probably just coincidental,
right,
because it was so simple what I did with him. But I was like, well, let me try this with another kid. So I tried it with some of the students that had some pretty severe trauma symptoms, anxiety symptoms. And I was like, holy shit, this is actually working. So I started tracking the data for about 6 months of all these different children, getting reports from the kids, from their parents, from the teachers. And I was like, this is working. So um so that's how I developed this stress tool and I started using it with the adults, and I've now kind of added some additional pieces to fine tune it for whatever it is that I'm working with. Maybe it's more if it's a clinical setting, or if it's just empowering
right, right,
someone to help their clients, break through subconscious beliefs or whatever. But really, the essence of it, the nitty gritty of it, is helping to neutralize the physiology of emotional triggers, because that's what we know happens oftentimes. This is something I carry around in my office often. I use this as an illustration of a rock, and the illustration that I use is that we're all carrying around this backpack filled with these different rocks, emotions, right?
yeah, yeah,
Unresolved emotional triggers. And if I just have one of these in my backpack, no big deal.
right,
If I have 1,000 of these, it's starting to weigh me down. but not all emotions are created equal. They're not all the size.
Right.
Some of us have bricks in our backpack. Some of us have boulders
Yeah.
in our backpack. And if I can help to, based on the science of the physiology of emotions, if I can find a way, which I have, to neutralize the intensity of that emotion, to de-trigger it, I don't know if that's a word, but basically
Yeah.
neutralize that trigger, it literally takes this weight off the mind and the body. And I've seen just radical things happen as a result. So in a nutshell, the technique just helps to identify what is the emotional trigger stuck point. What is that emotional physiological pattern that keeps running, that's interfering with how we're feeling, how we're behaving, when we're doing things we don't want to do, when we're not doing the things that we want to do, and basically just beginning to dismantle the glue that's holding that construct together. And then that's when people start to feel like, I mean, they'll even say, I feel like there's this weight lifted.
Yeah.
They start showing up differently in their relationships. They start feeling differently. They start walking more confidently, feeling more confident. The trauma, the nightmares start to dissipate. The things that they were craving. I had one guy that I was working with who had served 2 tours overseas as a Marine veteran. And he told me, after we did, I don't know how many sessions together, maybe 6 sessions total at this point. He said, Laurie, I have to tell you, he's like, I don't know if this has anything to do with the work that we're doing, but it's right in sync. Because I was not trying to not smoke weed when I started working with you. He's like, that was my medicine.
Right.
That was how I coped with the PTSD symptoms, and just being able to show up in in the community, be able to just walk out of my house and feel somewhat normal.
Right. Right.
He's like, after we started addressing these things, the nightmares started disappearing. And he's like, I don't even want to smoke weed. He's
Wow.
like, it just completely went away. And this was something that he was doing on a regular basis, daily, for years. So we talked about that, and we talked about how these things, that these burdens that we're carrying, why is it that we do the things that we do? And I always invite people to have compassion on them, towards themselves. If they're if they're self-medicating, why
Right.
are they self-medicating? What is the heaviness that it's numbing? That's what we need to focus on. When
Absolutely.
we focus on the heaviness, what happens oftentimes, the need for masking that is no longer a compulsion.
Yeah.
So anyway, I could go on and on about that,
No,
but
it's awesome.
so that's basically, I help people unpack their backpacks and help them to really to feel better fast.
Yeah. And you make me think about Gabor Mate, who we both really like his work and what he talks about. And in terms of addiction or all of these behaviors that we see, it really is. It's a lot of people will sometimes be consumed with guilt or shame for the repetitive behaviors that they're doing. But when we really help them look at, why are you doing this? When did this develop? And give them some compassion and grace to look at themselves in a way that's not judgmental, then they can start to see, man, this was a protection mechanism. I was using
Exactly.
this as a way to survive in the world because I felt
Exactly.
like I couldn't without it. And so all of those coping mechanisms that are really just defense mechanisms, protecting people, helping them survive and get through stuff, if they can become aware of them. And I love Alan Watts and his work and how he kind of talks about there's a paradox too. So sometimes the more that you try to get rid of it or to stop it, the more it perpetuates. And it sounds like with this one client that you were working with, that a lot of it was that wasn't even his goal, was to come in,
Right.
stop daily, habitually using marijuana, but as a result of doing deeper work and starting to, then all those unhealthy coping mechanisms can start to go away because we don't feel a need for them anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was thinking the other day too. I think quite a bit about language and how powerful it can be in. I don't want to go above and beyond. Like I like some of Don Miguel Ruiz's work, the Four Agreements,
Oh
um,
yeah.
and he says, we have to be careful with words and language because they cast spells, spelling and words and the power and what they can do. And another one of my favorite quotes is the most powerful force in the human psyche is how you describe yourself to yourself. And so all these words that we tell ourselves, but I think a big narrative that happens is we're telling ourselves something's wrong with me. I'm broken. I need to
Right.
go fix myself. I am sick. I am diseased. I have a neuroses, a syndrome, a deficit, a disorder. And I wonder how powerful that narrative becomes. And when we start to do work that can help somebody recognize, let's back up. Maybe you're not sick. Maybe you're not diseased. Maybe you're not mentally ill. Maybe you were trying to survive. And these were tools that you used to protect yourself along the journey of life that had you in survival mode. What tools do you want to pick up now? What can you go pull from your arsenal and learn and utilize to move through the world and evolve and grow holistically? That's a
Yeah.
completely different conceptual framework to understand yourself and your journey of life that really, I think, can have a profound impact on everything we're talking about, because your cognitive narrative can absolutely, because they're also attuned, it absolutely impacts your physical states in so many
Yes.
ways, physiologically and how you feel,
Yes.
nervous system, it all the blend of cognitions to emotions to physiology to behavior. And so, how do we back up and say, you're not broken, you're not damaged? Let's give yourself grace and compassion, and let's believe that you have the ability to be a warrior, a spiritual warrior, to move through your life, to find passion and just open up that. And a lot of times, I think so many people, it's the first time they've even heard that. And so much of them doesn't believe that. And to have an advocate and somebody, whether it be a therapist, a healer, a mentor, or community, start to support one another and believe in that journey for one another is so important.
Yes, it is. And I think, one of the things that you touched on a little bit too is just the inner dialogue. And sometimes that inner dialogue just goes unrecognized. It's kind of like the radio playing in the background and you don't even recognize what you're listening to, but you're hearing it. And then every once in a while, the words that a client or someone that we're working with is hearing, they might say something and then they hear themselves, or if you point it out to them and you ask them, for example, someone saying, "Oh, I'm so stupid." Where did that come from?
Yeah.
When do you remember the first time hearing that? And so when they start to think about that, that's when these things can start to can plant as like a faulty belief. Because in this, again, it usually goes back to our earlier years,
I know,
but then
right?
we start to have these perceptions of our reality, and it cultivates this unwanted belief. Of course, when you ask someone, do you want to feel that you're stupid, our conscious is like, well, no.
Right.
But when you start noticing and paying more attention to the programming and where in kind of dissecting that and where that programming began, you start to kind of enlighten them to be like, do you want that programming anymore? You know, it's
Yep.
kind of like the way that I describe it is almost as if we begin to change the algorithm.
Yep.
Because when we're like on TikTok, for example, or Instagram, and we're liking certain types of content, the algorithm is going to show us more of that content. And it's the
Absolutely.
same kind of dynamic with the neural pathways in our brain of, oh, I'm stupid. Oh, I'm so stupid. I'm stupid. I'm stupid. It's like hitting the like button on all the videos that are saying I'm stupid. And so the algorithm shows you more of what you're stupid,
Yep.
you're stupid, you're stupid. And when you begin to even if it feels like it's very difficult to begin liking other content, the algorithm is going to begin to show you more content and you can begin to change those neural pathways. So
Man,
yeah, I
wow.
think that's definitely an important piece.
It is. It's so important. And I was laughing. You made me think about the inner narrative and how songs will get stuck, like on a radio station.
Yes.
And I remember when my daughters were young, of course, they'd be watching all different types of TV shows and stuff. But I remember one time I was so irritated and I was doing something, I was driving somewhere, and I was like, why am I so irritated right now? And what had been running in the background of my mind for hours was the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse theme song. And it was like, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, come inside, it's fun inside. Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. And like, but I had blocked it out. But then when I really started to just give myself a second, I was like, I've been fucking singing Mickey Mouse Clubhouse theme song for hours straight. I
That is so funny.
and so we become, if you're not conscious of it, it's just there. And so
Yes.
not paying attention. I don't know if you're familiar with Bruce Lipton's work. He wrote,
Yes, I love his work.
okay, The Biology of Belief.
Yes.
So I'm so grateful that we are in a time and space, and I could critique society and culture all day long about Instagram and TikTok and screen time and the social dilemma. But Laurie, if we get down to it, I met you on Instagram. I met you on Instagram because I am creating a certain algorithm with consciousness expansion, with individuals that are devoted to holistic healing. And so we connected that way. And then when I think about the ability for us to program our subconscious mind in ways that we haven't before, we really are in a unique time where we can do that. We can curate these spaces of gratitude, of abundance, of healthy narratives for self, and start to challenge all these faulty agreements. And we have so
Yes.
many people supporting that. And so I was just listening to Bruce Lipton's work and him talking about programming the subconscious mind and the idea of your subconscious doesn't care what you're telling it. It's going to absorb whatever, but we don't recognize that so much of that programming has been built and has been conditioned by faulty narratives and agreements from society, from culture, and from our family system and from our parents. And as we get older, we can break free of those narratives and create new agreements and move into a place of seeing ourselves as potentiality. And who do we want to
Yes.
become? And what do we want to adhere to? Is beautiful.
Yeah. And how much more powerful when we can influence younger children and adolescents at an earlier age to help them become more attuned to the fact that they do have the power to change the algorithm as well, and they can actually um maybe hopefully prevent some of these things that could happen if it's left unchecked. So, we as adults being able to have the space and capacity to, which is what you're doing, I believe, in your practice, is holding that space to guide them, to be their guides, to be their mentors, to say,
Absolutely.
hey, there's all these different ways, there's all these different paths you can take. Would you like to take this path? Like, what are the benefits of taking this path?
Yeah.
Um, so that's the one thing that I think is really awesome about working with the younger generation, because there's such a although we can do this at any age, right? I mean, I
Yes.
work with clients in their 70s. They're like, I'm just now ready to deal with this trauma that's been haunting me for all these years, and it is never too late. But how amazing is it, when you think about all the different things, and again, I'm like backing out, looking at things more on a global perspective. Hurting people hurt other people,
Yes.
right? So when we are taking responsibility for our own hurt and pain at an earlier age, it begins to raise our vibration, so to speak, or it starts to kind of allow our light to shine brighter. And that has the opportunity to bring even that much more healing to the planet.
Rock and roll.
Happen at any age, but especially I think
You're
that's
right.
especially why I'm so passionate about the young kids.
And to bring up Marianne Williamson, she says that one beautiful quote, when we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give others permission to do the same. And it is, man, it's like it's that ripple effect because we are all connected. And it sounds so, pardon my language, but fucking, I've said fucking like 90 times on this. Why did I just
F-bombs are fully accepted in my office. I
um,
dropped them myself.
but like it's that Gandhi quote too. Be the change you want to see when you work on your own healing, when you work on your own pain. What you are doing for others around you is profound. It is one of the greatest gifts you could give the human beings around you that love and care for you, is to do your own work. And
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, what we do at Eternal Strength Radical Youth Work, it is my calling. It is my everything. The kids that come to the center, we got 72 kids coming right now, and they want to be up here, and they are amazing and beautiful and incredible. And to give them voice and to say, we're not going to tell you how to live your life, but we will damn sure be here with you on the journey. And we
Yeah.
can guide and support and influence and encourage and let you see the potentialities that exist, because you, all those narratives, again, you are beauty, you are truth, you are light, you are love, you are unlimited creative potentiality. And how do we get you to see that and let go of all these false agreements? Yeah, it's everything. Cool.
It really is. I'm really just excited for you and the work that you're doing, because even just one kid, when you begin to just provide them those tools at a young age, just one kid, changing the trajectory of that one kid's life then has a domino effect of who knows how many other people's lives. I mean, so it is a radical, it is radical work. When
Yeah.
you're talking about 72 people, how many millions of other people are going to be affected positively as a result of that? And for kids to have access to those tools and those resources, I mean, I have so many clients in their in as adults that said, I wish I would have known this when I was younger.
Yeah.
I wish I would have had access to this, you know. So I'm
Lori.
happy that you're following your heart, Wes.
Oh man, you better believe it. Have you ever seen a movie called Lady in the Water? It's a M Night Shyamalan
I've
Ding Dong.
heard of it. I don't think I have. I've heard of it though.
It's a beautiful movie. It's why we named our oldest daughter Story. But there's a part in it. I always think about it, man. I always tear up. But like, there's M Night, the director. He plays a role, and he's writing a book, and it's called The Cookbook, and it's like a manifesto. It's like a critique on society and culture and consciousness expansion. And there's an oracle in the movie, and she's telling him his life and how it's going to play out. And she says something along the lines of like, he starts to kind of get an inkling. He says, I'm going to die, aren't I? Somebody's gonna kill me for writing this book. And she says, yeah. And she says, but some, and I'll tear up thinking about it, but she says, but some young human soul is going to get a hold of your work, and it's going to impact them at such a level that they're going to change the world. And that's where I'm like, man, if we can do that, whatever it may be, like you said, that one kid, and they can get like the power that they hold. And that's what I think, kind of recognizing that, like, you may not think that you have much power, but if you can just pour your heart out, you can impact other people at such a level that you couldn't even recognize. And that's where I think those ripple effects. And I remember, I mean, Tupac, the hip hop artist, he always said something along the lines of, I
Yeah.
don't think I'm going to change the world, but I damn sure know that my work is going to impact somebody else who is going to change the world. And so those ways that
Yeah.
we build relationship and just letting these kids see how much power they hold, because I think they feel so isolated, alone, disconnected, and disempowered. And so trying to let them see how powerful they are and what they can do with their words, with their writing, with their music, with their art, with their craft, with expression, with sharing, shine that light, and
Yeah.
you can carve this path for so many others and be a beacon of light for them. And that's what we all do for one another. And I love what you said, the way you said it, Lori. Like, it can happen at any age, but we owe it to our youth. if we can turn to them and we can be there for them and help teach them these lessons, then they're going to carry that torch.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Well, this is awesome. I'm like, it was very random that we connected, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe there's that divine force that's
Exactly. I was gonna
behind
say,
this.
but was it? I don't know. Maybe what you're seeking is seeking you is what I have on my screensaver.
Okay,
And I think that's very true. You know,
absolutely.
I think we were seeking each other. We're very, our visions for humanity and the people that we serve is
Yes.
very like, there's
Oh
a
man, we just
like-mindedness there. And
came
so
into alignment, and it was just like
yeah,
boom. And that's where I
the
was like,
algorithm, the algorithm
yes,
was, yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So really quickly as we wrap up, how can people get a hold of you? I know you're on Instagram, but will you give everybody your tags so they can follow you? And then how should they reach out if they have questions or want to contact you?
Okay, yeah. So they can follow me at Healthy Holistics is my username on Instagram and TikTok, Healthy Holistics. And my website is healthyholistics.net. They can email
Awesome.
me there as well, healthyholistics.net.
And I'll do that fancy thing and put all the links below.
Okay, great.
I probably won't do it like the super fancy way where I'm like, bloop, bloop, and it pops up and I'm like
Just a
dragging
standard
stuff.
link.
Yes, the links will be up there. But Laurie,
Yeah.
thank you for coming on. Thank you for your time, for sharing your heart, your energy, authenticity, and I'm sure we'll talk again at some point.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
It was really, really great. It recharged my heart.
Rock and roll.